And now everybody inside knows that there is about to be a breach by Americans. So I've lost the element of speed, I've lost the element of surprise, and there's nothing on that drone to overcome violence of action on that objective. So now I'm about to hit a target where everybody knows I'm inside. They've all closed their doors. They've got belt-fed PKM pointed at the door, and now we're about to go eat our lunch.
Welcome to the Startup Defense. My name is Callye Keen. I have Mark Holden on. Now, Mark, you have been a Navy corpsman. You've worked at some pretty illustrious startups. You've worked in safety, and I know you put out a ton of content. So you're a multidisciplinary, multifaceted man. But the way we start off the show is I want to know, what are you passionate about right now?
Yeah, I appreciate that. For me, fostering community within the defense industrial base is kind of a passion of mine that I'm serving through content, through my engagement through social media, which is primarily through LinkedIn and YouTube. For me, there is this big need for a more present and robust defense industrial base within America. We're gearing up for some really scary conflicts, unified land operations in the European continent, turmoil in the Middle East. We've got Southeast Asia to worry about, and some weird forms of hybrid warfare that are coming to our shores now as we start to gear up for littoral combat in the South China Sea. And I see the tea leaves, I see the drumbeat, and I know it's really important for us as a community to come together and start talking about some of these challenges. We've got this big, wide gap between some of the large defense primes, the small little startups, and while we've kind of been at it for the last couple of years, we need to band together. And so for me, what I try to do through my content, while I certainly try telling very accurate and highly detailed stories through it, is making sure that we've got a mouthpiece, a community for other folks within the industry to feel comfortable to come forward and start talking about this defense industrial base that we're building, because gosh, in a few years, we're going to need it.
Yeah, we definitely are aligned on this mission because traditionally I come from manufacturing and particularly defense manufacturing. So probably the quietest combination of industries that you could get into. People feel uncomfortable about sharing their defense entrepreneurial journey. I think that's changing. Talk about, venture capital and acting like startups and innovation and all that fun stuff. But traditionally, manufacturing is this very quiet, it's the biggest industry in the world. I'm in Northern Virginia. People will come to our facility and I didn't know that there was actually manufacturing here. But we have Lego, we have Rubbermaid, we have Northrop, all their space systems down the road. We've got all of the big boys, of course, primes, but there's pockets of these innovative companies all over the place. Some of the biggest medical companies are here. If we're taking leadership from the revenue leaders in this industry, they don't exactly put out exciting content. And so these smaller innovative companies, I feel like they're doing a disservice because they're fighting on equal ground with Raytheon. And when they're doing very, very interesting things that would be amazing content, they got to get their story out there, attract talent. And I see what you're doing. I'm like, Mark he's with it.
I appreciate that. One of my superpowers is drawing from my operational time. So yes, I've got a storied career standing up growth engine lines of business across the defense industrial base. But for me, what I realize as a product leader in the industry trying to cobble together marketing shoots is you've got folks who understand the cinematography aspect of marketing. You've got folks who understand the brand awareness piece, and maybe they can cobble together an interesting story. But for me, authenticity is so important in this industry because people come from the ranks of the military and then find themselves either as a customer or as a patron or as a member of this defense industrial base. And very quickly, those individuals can see the one thing wrong with the shoot, and very quickly that disenfranchises them. And then now you've wasted potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars on a shoot because you missed one thing. So for me, focusing on authenticity is really important, and drawing in from my operational time, I'm able to cobble together some highly compelling and highly operationally relevant pieces of content for some of the clients that I work with. And for me, it's about drawing from not just the my operational time, but through the experience in the defense industrial base, seeing what works and just tearing apart some of the just substandard content coming out of some of the large defense primes. It's been a good time. And so working with some of the smaller companies that are trying to enter the defense space through high value, quick hit, high quality content has just been a great way to disrupt the industry.
Yeah, and you've certainly picked up lessons along the way because you were at Shield AI, and I want to talk about that role a little bit, but they're, of course, one of the venture darlings. There's somebody that we reference on the show pretty frequently. They're up there with Andrel and maybe Hadrian and a couple of the other people, really mixing up different elements of the industry. I don't think they've been that shy about putting out video of VBAT and talking about putting intelligence in fighter jets and very interesting cutting edge projects. What other lessons maybe that we don't know from the outside did you pick up at the working with such an innovative company?
Yeah, sure. For me, and for those who don't know, I was fortunate enough to stand up the product team at Shield AI. I was a product leader there for a little under a year. And for me, initially coming into Shield AI, it was a big lesson in humility. I saw Nova, the initial product at the time, and I couldn't put my finger on the product market fit on this product. I just couldn't. And I had this morbid curiosity of this product, and I had to join the ranks of the company to find out really what this product was about. And so I'll break it down really briefly, because this was a huge lesson in humility for me as a product manager. So Shield AI's product, flagship product called the Nova, their hardware that supports their HiveMind software. So Nova's job is to enter a building to find the bad guys before the bad guys find the good guys, right? Such a noble mission. And so obviously they were wildly successful with highly oversubscribed fundraisers for their first A, B, and C rounds until we diversified into the VBAT and the Heron Systems portfolio. So Group 3, tail-sitter aircraft, and automated dogfighting behavior for F-16. But before that, the lead up to that was Nova. And I couldn't figure it out. This thing was a square peg in a round hole of a market. Because let me break it down for you. So the pitch is, Nova's this product. You and me, man. We're a special forces team. We got four folks behind us, and we're ready to go clear a 1,000 square foot building. So me and 4 or 5 of my closest friends can probably clear that 1,000 square foot building in about 60 seconds, right? Nova does it about the same, right? And so the most dangerous part of any general operation, certainly that initial breach, right? Close quarters combat. It's ugly, it's dirty, it's noisy, right? It's just this ugly thing. So naturally, wouldn't you like to know where the bad guys are? Wouldn't you like to know where the threats lie before you go ahead and enter that fatal funnel of that doorway? Right? Perfect. Hundreds of $millions invested. Easy day. I still couldn't figure it out, because here's what happens. You have this very challenging triad to balance in a direct action operation like close quarters combat, like that scenario where we're clearing a 1,000 square foot building. You have to balance 3 things: speed, surprise, and violence of action. If the rules of engagement dictate that I may not use violence of action, I can overcome this tactical disadvantage with speed and surprise. If I lose the element of surprise, I can overcome this tactical disadvantage with speed, violence of action. Cool, easy day. So let's break that down and juxtapose it to Nova, because here's where my problem was. So Nova, 60 seconds to clear 1,000 square feet, right? Great. So just about as fast as my special forces teams. But now I have to go clear that building. So now I've doubled my time on target, potentially tripled my time on target. I've now got a very loud and angry quadcopter going through this narrow hallway, and now everybody inside knows that there is about to be a breach by Americans. So I've lost the element of speed, I've lost the element of surprise, and there's nothing on that drone, nothing to overcome violence of action on that objective. So now I'm about to hit a target where everybody knows I'm inside, they've all closed their doors, they've got belt-fed PKM pointed at the door, and now we're about to go eat our lunch. Got to the company, and the company's leadership just were incredible mentors to me. And they sat me down, and I asked, what's the deal with this thing? And they broke me down and said, listen, initially this product, yes, conceptually, this is the concept for it, but really it's our demonstrator for a larger variant of our what's HiveMind, right? To the larger extension, right? We have to start somewhere. So it makes sense, because you can't just start with F-16. And it was such a lesson in humility, right? So I had come from PE-backed companies. We'd sold it to FLIR. We'd sold FLIR to Teledyne. I had just come from Shield as employee number 16,002 at a giant defense company that managed revenue to the week. And I had a lot of thoughts, right? And it was the great minds of both the executive and the technical leadership of Shield AI that really told me what Nova's mission was. The fact that you need a demonstrator out there, the fact that you need to have something to showcase your product other than slide work was super important. And so, for me, it was a big lesson in humility. And I realized very quickly that as a consultant now, I'm able to step back into a company. I'll be able to formulate preconceived notions, but you really got to get under the hood of that company to understand the subtle nuances, because oftentimes your preconceived notions are wrong.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of really great startup lessons or innovation lessons in that as well, because if you can show, not tell, you can really start to have valuable conversations with the customer. And if they push back and tell you, hey, here's my problem, you've just tripled time on target, you haven't really saved any lives, this and this and this, and you say, well, we haven't yet, but now we know with greater accuracy what the gap is, and I can bridge my valley of death with my engineering talent. I can focus in on that. I can focus my BD and partnerships on that. I can focus how my deck looks and how my marketing looks and how all of this looks on this very specific problem that you have. Whereas with a slide deck, it's all just numbers. And I had a similar, I'd say, pushback with Shield early on. mostly because I know so many people that have created drone companies, and some of them ended up going into bridge inspection. Some of them did, crops. Some of them did, solar. Some of them did work out very well in defense. But I looked at it and said, what's so special about this? And it took a lot of time sussing out the details to really, the same thing with Swarm, right? So HiveMind is Swarm software. I'm like, okay, well, I have probably 3 friends that do autonomy from level 1 to 4 or do Swarm as well. So like, what's the combination here? And it really, over time, it susses out as they can maintain this level of innovation and customer engagement. They can make the message clearer and clearer, and they can make a better and better product, not a perfect product from day one. And so where the other people kind of wimped out and went into bridge inspection, you just see Shield keep going and going and going. Now you have this program of record, VBAT's very successful. And the idea of having a mid 6-figure Swarm drone, all with all these capabilities is pretty mind-blowing at this point, but dial it back a few years and you're like, another drone company? I really like the idea of conversationally working with somebody like yourself to get in their third point of view, push back, and then giving innovators the tools to market and message what they're doing with customers so they can get continual improvement and feedback. Really different approach. That's the startup approach. Really different approach to the done in one, defense contracting, big boy prime setup.
Yeah, continuous improvement is just one of those things that it didn't even hit the audio industry until like well past the Industrial Revolution, right? The auto industry would create a car and they would say, this is the car for the next 5 years, and they wouldn't change it. And then they realized there's so much value that they can give the consumers with continual iteration. We got windows that roll down electronically. Like, let's get that into the next model. We don't need a whole new car for this one feature. And it really just jump-started the auto industry in the US, and it was huge. I start to see a little bit of that with the defense industrial base, but you're absolutely correct. Oftentimes, and I think about products like the B-52 hotel that's going to be flying for another 50 years. It's been flying for 70-something years. Like, we will continue to perpetuate great products. We will also continue at the same time to perpetuate bad products within the defense industrial base when new products need to get done. But as you know, man, there is so much financial programming and fiscal programming and palming that has to do just to get new capabilities in. So it may not be fair to juxtapose the auto industry or the defense industrial base, but the point is continuous improvement for the betterment of your customers is so important. And what better of a cause than the defense industrial base when your users are the warfighters?
I've just seen this shift where there's a new generation of companies that are going out and hacking it together, building it, and then showing up to demos with a product.
Yep.
And it's not perfect. Usually it's less than perfect, but you put them against the traditional way is that at that demonstration, there would be nothing. It would be a PowerPoint presentation and somebody says, oh yeah, I have my product. Let me show you. And then they film it and they release a little video for it. And they put out PR around it. Then they raise funds around it. And that is a wildly commercial approach to defense. And so I enjoy it. I mean, with my manufacturing background, that's how my brain thinks is like, can I print something, machine something? Can I make a board? Can I use an existing thing, put it together? Can we take pictures, send somebody a slick sheet, make a video for them, just send it to them and say, hey, what do you think about this? Get them to tell me that it's really bad, that it just tripled their time on target, like right away, and get feedback. It's like a different world now that we live in, this like innovation world. And I don't want to pull out specific like case studies from who you're working with right now, but I want to pull out maybe some redacted case studies of like how this works for small businesses, the startups that are listening to this, why this is so important to think about their actual marketing, not as a separate piece. It's not sales. It's part of their innovation strategy. It's part of their business model itself.
No, I love this. If I had 30 seconds to impart wisdom on a solopreneur, entrepreneur trying to break into this industry, here's checkmate in 2 moves. Identify evangelists, build social proof. That's it. Strategically sell, right? Strategic selling is an incredible weapon in the United States defense industrial base, and it's so wildly important of getting your products into the faces or into the hands of the users. Social proof is really important, but the evangelists are just as important. People to evangelize your product, ideally within the ranks of the customer sets that you're looking to sell into. Super important to have that beta user that's there to not only evangelize you, but to work with you to get your beta product to a V1 product, because there's going to be a lot of challenges. But it's so important. I'll tell you a great story. This is one of the reasons that 10 months ago, I started getting on LinkedIn, posting every day. My first role out of the military working for the government was working for a company called Arion, where we created a product called Skyraider. Before Skyraider came to bear, we had a product called Sky Ranger. And when I first started working for the company, I just got my LinkedIn set up, and I realized that we had one really good opportunity to demo this product to some groundbreaking Marine Corps programs to potentially start selling this thing in a big way into the Marine Corps. And so I said, okay, how can I use this social media thing to influence this? So I spent about a couple of weeks preparing my LinkedIn profile with connecting with the folks who I knew I'd be demoing to, and making sure that I connected to their networks, I was following all their stuff and had everything set up. And then the weekend before we showed up to demo, I went to do some flight testing up in the mountains. I took our beautiful 60 times zoom camera and I pointed on a house, and then I zoomed back. And then you just got to see this big wide angle lens, and the zoom was really far away, and you could see the aircraft kind of buffeting, but this picture was really stable, and it was just this beautiful 20-second video. Now I go fly in on Monday morning, I check into Camp Lejeune, hit the hotel, and there's a team of the evaluators who are going to be evaluating our system sitting there in the lobby, looking at their phones, and they're looking at that video, and they're talking about it. And I'm checking in, and I'm sitting there with a smile on my face. I get my key card, and I walk past them, and I say, you know that thing you're looking at? I slap the hard case. I'm like, this is the aircraft you're going to see tomorrow. And I'm not saying that that's the thing that put us over the edge, but in turn, like, the focus was we didn't need to see it in altitude, in the mountains, in the wintertime with incredible winds aloft when you're trying to find like a man-sized target 5.2 kilometers away like we did with that. They saw that. They had that social proof. And so when we went and flew it off the East Coast, they were like, cool, we know it flies at altitude. We saw it. They had so much more confidence in it. So yes, they went in and procured it, but anybody can do that, right? Anybody can leverage this opportunity that we have, both either within social media or within strategic selling, just by like reaching out to somebody and saying, hey, I've got an idea, or hey, I've got a product, and getting some feedback on it. But in turn, that social proof is wildly, wildly important. And we do it now, like some of the secret sauce that we're doing. So this technological readiness level, it's a really big thing in the US government. Technological readiness level, for those who don't know, started by NASA. TRL-1s, like, wet finger in the air in a PowerPoint slide. TRL-9s, like, fully fielded or operated in a replicative environment. So what we realize is that it's pretty expensive to take a TRL 1 or 2, 3 product and try to get it into a TRL 4 or 5 product, because at that point you are replicating the environment that particular piece of technology is being utilized in. And you can do this you can do this through marketing, right? You're a user. If you grab folks that are either users of your product and you have the opportunity to conduct that marketing shoot in a very replicative environment, you are documenting a conceptual test of your product that in turn can be leveraged to bolster theoretically your technological readiness level through marketing dollars. And so through that, like, that's the nature of product management. It's connecting marketing and it's connecting the business and the sales and the tech and all the organization of the business. And so for me, that is one of the reasons why I focus on marketing, but there's certainly a lot of passion with it for me, but it is real. Like, social proof is a big thing. And for those looking to break in, you don't need to be this well-funded gajillion-dollar company. One of the reasons that I really enjoyed FLIR is we used to spend 12.5% of top-line revenue on IRAD, internal research and development dollars. Not so much at the big defense primes. 0.5% to 1%. Yes, top-line revenue is bigger, but there's significantly more of a internal research and development environment. And so having had the leadership to say, like, yeah, we'll give you a little bit of IRAD to develop a prototype so you can bring to a customer to validate it, like, that's all you need. Because oftentimes people are like, well, you need to validate this PowerPoint slide before we can even get there. But, if your product individual is able to validate the product market fit, and you don't think you're going to be that tired toddler trying to mash a square peg of a product in a round hole of a market, you're in great shape.
I'm glad you mentioned TRL levels. It is something that's industry specific, but DoD-wise, NASA-wise, most of the programs, they have a flavor of TRL. They might call it MRL. They might call it something else, CRL. But it's all really the same thing. It's important to know because at different TRL levels, you're eligible for different non-dilutive funding.
Yep.
And so we have people I talk to almost every day. They want to make something, they want to invent something, they want to commercialize something. And to know, hey, I got to put this information out there because I need to capture a customer who's going to help me pilot it or look at it. And then I can get to TRL 3, which makes me very eligible for an SBIR phase 1. and then I will get $100,000-$200,000, depending on who's doling out the money, to then commercialize that, hopefully in partnership with me or a company like me, and hopefully in partnership with that customer who saw that piece of material or that piece of content. And then they'll be able to go to phase 2 and get $1 million. They'll be able to then deploy it with that customer. They'll be able to do more matchmaking and BD opportunities. Usually at that point, then they're eligible for some type of seed or pre-seed funding, start talking to different very early stage, venture capital, and go on. But to pull that in from having a finished product and waiting and then just trying to go the direct contract route, the market is fairly difficult to jump into, but there are all these entry points. And a lot of those entry points, are say Tech Connect is coming up, right? So Defense Tech Connect, SBIR Showcase, all you have to do is submit a white paper and maybe a video. And you can win a little bit of money, but you can also be invited to a table of all these companies like you and all the nerds like me and all the community leaders and all the venture capital people will be there and to see your product. So it's really not as opaque of an industry as people portray it. It's much more porous, but it does start with understanding what do I need to do to get one person's interest enough. So they'll say, yeah, I'll come over and I'll take a look at it and we can fly that thing around a parking lot and I can give you some requirements. And that actually hits most of the needs to get to TRL 3, believe it or not. And now I can go get $180,000 out of Air Force if I want. And that's wild. It's so wild to me. So I'm really glad that you mentioned it. We talk about it pretty often here. People are obsessed with venture capital, and rightly so. If you want to scale to a $1 billion company, somebody's probably going to help you with a little bit of growth capital. But for the most part, people just want to get started, and $50K or $1 million would take them pretty far. So I know that you've been in and around that, quite a bit. So I appreciate you mentioning that, but it's really interesting to hear how content plays a part of that journey.
It could. There are a couple of big misconceptions about taking the government's money. 2, in fact, that come to mind. One is that the government's going to steal my IP. The second is I'm a well-funded PVC-backed company. Why do I need the government's money? Well, first thing is government's been pretty good with me, at least, about purpose rights, right? If I'm doing a joint development, I can usually justify why critical things need to stay within the company and not be owned by the government. And I've never had a problem, even when I've taken government dollars, CRAD, customer research and development dollars, to build something for the government. They've always been really good and very open about intellectual property restrictions and considerations there. And the second piece is we have all the money we need. Why do we need the U.S. government's money? I'll tell you, sure, if $100,000 out of your IRAD budget is worth $1 million out of the government's budget. And it's primarily because of the emotional, fiscal, and administrative buy-in of that program into your effort. Now, that's not to say they're going to carry all the way to the end, because there's a lot of sivers that die on the vine. There's so many of them, but it's so important to recognize that if you take money from the government's now invested in you. You have a program manager, that evangelist you've identified to help build stuff that's emotionally ready for you guys to bring your product to market, because they've got a problem every day that you solve for and they work with you. There's the government procurement office that once you're supporting them, they're there to help you with all sorts of things, all sorts of resources. And doing business with the government is it's really tough, because you got to do things like all these crazy DD 23045s and all the things you need to do business compliantly within the United States government's a lot. But there's certainly gold in the hills, and there's no better place to sell on value than the aerospace and defense market.
Yeah, I think if you look at those opportunities as ways of entering the market, making friends, getting champions, like you were saying, getting those key accounts. Everybody wants to sell to Navy SEALs or SOCOM, or they always say these wild things. I'm like, you can just go to Softworks' website, right? Or you can go to AAL's website. They have some really great opportunities out there, less management than a traditional SIBR, and they tell you exactly what they're trying to do. You can come up with any wild idea that you want, make a slide deck and a video and send it off to them. And it's maybe somebody says no, you'll probably get good feedback. But if they say yes, I can't think of a better way to develop a business relationships, right? So from a BD perspective, relationship perspective is incredible. To be honest, a lot of more established companies, they say exactly what you said. Well, I don't need 100K. I don't need 200K. I'm like, well, do you want to sell into the US government because you have no track record whatsoever right now. So you're either going to have to work through like our sales network, or you're going to have to go through one of these kind of ports of entry and build some muscle of how this whole process works. And TRL sounds boring, but honestly, it's really not that bad. If you want to get non-dilutive funding, even grants, it's all aligned to that as a structure. So
Yeah, of course.
good point.
And you mentioned briefly special operations being just a great funding line, and there are folks often who. So I believe that riches lie in niches. Don't get me wrong, but I do believe in this industry that like we're making products or services that are just geared towards tier one operators. So like the shadowy sides of the intelligence community, National Mission Force. It's a higher form of patriotism. It's so difficult to scale that business. You need to pick tough problems, and like there's no better place to build evangelist and social proof than the shadowy parts of the United States government. However, scaling that is difficult. I oftentimes have folks coming to me and say, we've got this great thing and it's used by only a couple of folks in the military. How do we get everybody to buy it? And it's like, well, you didn't pick a wide enough problem. This problem is only encountered by folks. And you're doing great, but scaling that business is very difficult. And so jumping in with special operations with your products is a double-edged sword. Sometimes folks polarize way too sexy and become way too niche of a product and can't scale. And the folks who figure it out realize that special operators are a great place to test conventional equipment that can eventually make their way into the fleet in the years to come.
Yeah, and certainly not only the product features, the price, but then the way that it's described and talked about is going to be a lot different if you're going for big army and you're going to talk to AAL about technology. They think about technology in a very high scale, right? Talking to them about batteries. We had Tony Williams on, and so they think in the tens of thousands of anything, and you're looking at how do we scale an idea. That's a very large organization to sell into, but 0 to 10% adoption rate, it can just crush a small company. I like niches. I like building personal relationships, but yeah, that's a good point. I think the holy grail that everybody is pushing, look for dual use. So, hey, if you can jump in primarily, work with SOCOM. SOCOM's great to work with. I mean, we went to Soft Week. You get to talk to everybody. You get to see what everybody's working on. Everybody has a booth. Really great. But as a primary customer, great. But I will tell you the way that Special Forces thinks about their problems and the way they can spend money is a lot different than the way that anybody else can spend money. So that's it's a really interesting point for people. I think that the government makes a great primary and secondary customer, but you look at like FLIR. So you're at FLIR, right? There's absolutely government-only applications that they make, very high-end products, but they also make a product that I can attach to my iPhone, the broadest possible market appeal product. So how do you scale out of that? And I think really to just hammer this point home for people, a lot of that is I want to be able to communicate with a broader and broader customer base and still solve a problem. So I have to continually communicate what I can do and figure out what they want. It's been really, really hard for these small companies because they don't even use LinkedIn. Forget about posting on LinkedIn. They don't even read LinkedIn. They don't have a blog. They don't have a podcast. They don't have a newsletter. We always joke here is when somebody's going to come visit and I go look at their website, a lot of people's website, you can't even figure out what they do. And to be honest, like I understand, especially in like I see like why it's just nonsense on their website. But there's legitimate innovation businesses that look at those organizations and say, I'll copy what Frank has on his website. I'm like, no, don't copy what Frank is doing his own thing, right? He doesn't really even need a website. You need to have a website and you need to figure this out. You're a startup. Come on. I don't know if that makes sense for people, but traditionally this is like a business where you could run a $10, $20 million company and not have a website. And it's just mind-blowing to people outside the industry, and that's changing pretty fast.
Oh, it truly is. It kind of levels the playing field a little bit for all. Like there's not a whole lot of social media influence that can happen. However, you go to the AUSAs, you come off the metro, and there's the giant like F-35 there, and Soft Week for sure. You got banners everywhere that's there. And too often I find folks that protract civilian trends, whether it's product management or marketing or even pricing trends, into the defense industrial base and fail miserably because you have to parrot the U.S. government strategic narrative back to them in the form of your marketing material. You have to solve a hard problem on the battlefield. You got to save lives doing it. You got to replace something of consequence, and you have to do it at a tenth the cost. And that's table stakes right now for disrupting the industry. It's so tough. But if you got the right team with you and you got the right product and you're equipped to survive that good old valley of death, you can get there. And yeah, there's always that focus on dual use, especially with all of the great opportunities to start selling into our coalition force partners, because we're going to need it, right? We're all focused on the great power competition. And European theater, the unified land operations there, and the littoral combat in the South China Sea will require an incredible amount of coalition force interoperability. So for folks looking to sell into the U.S. government and trying to survive that valley of death, yeah, look internationally, because there is an incredible amount of procurement opportunities, and it's a great choice for you to bifurcate your product. Meaning you have a product that you sell internationally that you charge $100 for, and then you have something that you sell to the U.S. government that's relatively the same product, but maybe there's the access controls in place, maybe there's the anti-tamper switch that you had to put there so it's StatAg compliant, but now you've got a product that you can sell for $300, 3x, right? It's an opportunity to expand margins, and I'm all about value selling. I try to focus on products that I can have the opportunity to work on, sell on value and not on price, because too often it's like a race to the bottom, and that's why I don't do too much in like drone portfolios these days, because it is just an utter race to the bottom right now.
I know you were at AUSA, and I know you create content, so you have to be a great listener. So I'm focusing in on some of the bigger initiatives like Army's 2030 plans. So you have like 5G on the move, and of course, Replicator. Everybody's talking about drones. How do you rapidly create 1,000? But I want to hear from you some of those big trends that you see, and then let's talk about how people can actually follow these things, because to me, it's very public, but I realize like I live in this little bubble of this is what I do. But if you wanted to break in, what are some of those big trends? Obviously, the political climate's changing very, very quickly. So there's some immediate obvious things. I don't think the applications are obvious, but what are some of those big pieces that you see happening right now that we should be paying attention to as innovators?
Scaling the force comes to mind. Right now is a very scary time in the defense and the DoD, right? So we've drawn down in global war on terrorism. We're no longer conducting wide-scale counterinsurgency and counterterrorism operations across the globe. So we have now realized that there is an incredible amount of veterans that were part of GWAT that have looked to the great power competition and say, well, my fight's done, I'll leave this one to the next generation. So we are hemorrhaging talent out of the military. And at the same time, because of the political climate, we're having a hard time meeting recruitment numbers. No one's meeting recruitment numbers. And so if you look at how the DoD is trying to solve for this, there's a reason that the fiscal year 2023 and certainly 24, that there is a year-over-year increase, 40% of technology budgets, 40% increase in technology budget year-over-year to scale the force. And that's like, you look to the Shield AIs, you look to the Arians, the Sky Raiders, like it's all about providing one individual to be able to scale operations across a large area of effects. And what I mean by this is you can have one Marine solve a problem, or you can have one Marine with 12 drones all operating in concert solve a problem. And they've realized that they can overcome some of the lack in troop strength by bolstering that with technology. But if I spend a lot of time at these trade shows, spend a lot of time talking to the nation's senior leaders, and I ask them the same questions. What keeps you up at night? And I listen, as you know, I try to be a good listener, and I realize that there are three things that we as a defense industrial base need to arm our military with capabilities with in order to fight and win in that next great conflict. And that's lethality, dispersion, and mobility. The speed of battle will move dizzyingly fast. The contested environments, electromagnetically, GPS, communications will not be there, right? So we have this massive problem on being able to conduct combat operations in this next disparate environment. We know that because of our electronic signature and our heavy use of electronics, that the enemy will pinpoint us in a very short period of time. And so in order for our forces to thrive in this new operational environment, the technology, the solutions need to ensure that those forces are more lethal. They can operate in a more dispersed manner, in a decentralized manner, and that they have the opportunity to be highly mobile, because speed will be survivability. So if you take lethality, you add some mobility, and you add some dispersion opportunity in there, you now have survivability for the great power competition. And so the companies looking to get into this industry, it's a pretty good time to do it. If you look at 2 years ago, wet finger in the air, right? We're drawn down in Afghanistan, global war on terrorism is done. Now you've got all these companies who have polarized to GWAT with all their solutions, where we're fighting toothless goat herders in caves, And now they have to retool their entire innovation base to start rationalizing the fact our great power competition is going to put us up against the likes of Russia and China in a way we've never seen. And that a hybrid warfare today, this gray zone, is operations are getting run rampant around American streets. And so vigilance is certainly important, but for any folks looking to get into it, now's a great problem because we got a lot of problems to solve. Now's a great time to start bringing solutions in because the problems are real and the drum is beating, and it beats louder and louder every single day.
It's pretty wild. Even in the past couple months, the conversations have completely changed from the, hey, this is the multidisciplinary, multi-joint force, like this is what we imagine this is going to be, to, hey, you know that thing that you spoke about at Fort What's and What? Yeah, we'd like to demo that in a couple weeks. Hey, yeah, like that was a white paper. Okay, so yeah, we will get started on that. But we're moving very, very quickly, and really all forms of technology, things that you would think are pretty standard commercially, like being able to use your phone in a DDIL environment with totally denied signal, it's not going to happen, right? So there's just a massive market, whether somebody is interested in software, they're interested in signal, they're interested in just pure tech, compute, AI. There's lots of these issues. To your drone point, there's been lots in flight, and it's still not a saturated market. There's still lots of white space in there. I'll give one is HERF-hardened drones. Like nobody's really solving that problem adequately. If you're listening and you want to, I'd love to help you solve that problem. But look at all of the acquisition behavior that's happening in UASs right now, right? Lots of companies being scooped up, lots of funding going behind that because the Navy can't get people to be on those giant ships that they have. So they want to be able to just send a drone. They want to send a sub. And so if you are interested in robotics, if you're interested in fabrication, there's a lot of 10x, 100x problems. And we talk about it on the show, but it's like 6 months ago, it'd be like, hey, this is a nice place to explore. Go look at some innovation challenges. Like think about how you could dual use your product. We could talk about bridging your product into defense. But now it's kind of like, you should look at doing that now. You should look at doing that right now. There's very interested people. We haven't spent any money seriously on EW capabilities in a decade. You could argue against that, but like new jamming technology is like really just not implemented out there. So you look at how environments are not just contested, but they're easily completely denied by, I always joke on this show, Mark, it's like, there's things that people can do that are like 15-year-olds with YouTube that are highly disruptive on both sides right now. And that's how far behind we are. Things that you can do with a hack RF or with an Arduino, and that's what we're up against at scale, is like a country of engineers and a country of hackers. And so what we have, it has to go through this rapid innovation cycle. And that's what this show's about. But now is an amazing time to get out there and listen. What are good ways that people can actually go out there and like figure this out? Like listen to the customer.
Yeah, so the customer, unfortunately, within the defense industrial base, within our industry, the customer is often hard to find and cagey, and they generally won't give you the straight answer, and they generally have to bite their tongue a little bit because they're a contracting officer and they've got 5 other companies asking the same question, things like that. And it really, for me, what I found, like, at least that works for me, is one, community, right? So like the glorious thing about LinkedIn, now YouTube for me, is being able to draw upon, one, the content that's there because everybody's sharing their observations, but two, to also pressure test stuff with my audience, right, with the community that we've built here. And it's so important to pressure test that stuff because, as we talked about, it's like my time at Shield AI, where I had a very misconceived notion about a product. Like, it's important to regulate that. For me, it's like trade shows. Like, that is the place that I go to binge. I binge a lot on not just the government, because it's great. You sit down, you can hear the government's problem, and they say, these are our problems. These are our modernization priorities. And you can go ahead and do something about it. It's also a great place for industry because a couple of things you can learn from walking the trade show floor. I've been doing AUSA for a lot of years now. And same thing. So I do AUSA, SHOT Show, Soft Week, Modern Day Marine, Soft Aerospace, Cyber, all that stuff, right? We'll do all the small ones too. But what I love is watching the industry. You know, a couple of things. One, they bring the same crap to the same trade shows, or they bring the same thing to different trade shows, meaning that they're using the same marketing material for trying to get one product into the Army to get another product into the Marine Corps. And it's also great to see who's not bringing anything new, right? What's missing from this thing? That's the biggest thing I ask myself every day when I walk that show floor. And I am, for those who know me at AUSA and for those big shows, I walk that show floor constantly. And I always see who's innovating, who's doing something different, and who's staying the same. Because if you're an innovator and you're looking to disrupt the market, find out who's not moving. Find out who's waiting for the government to ask them how much they need to fix the product, or find the opportunity to also collaborate, right? There's tons of opportunities with small companies to work with bigs. One, to bolster, a collective bid, but two, there's a lot of those bigs have a lot of undefended flanks that, as you mentioned, a 14-year-old kid on YouTube could probably solve for. And they sometimes need those 14-year-old kids off YouTube. And so for them, it's a great opportunity to disrupt, and there's no better place to knock on the door of a company you want to work with than at one of those trade shows, because there's generally a business development individual there. There's maybe somebody that can get you back into the executives, heck, maybe there's an executive themselves. And so for me, it's trade shows. For me, it's a constant thirst for learning across what's going on in the world. I do some of the news, but I'm not on TikTok. I'm not on Instagram. I'm not on Facebook. So there's a whole lot, there's a whole part of this world that there's this noise that I don't hear, that maybe there's something there. But for me, it's about listening to what's going on the ground, talking to people about it, asking the government the hard questions. What keeps you up at night? What are your big modernization priorities? What's the problems that you're trying to solve for today? And I ask that to everybody. I ask that to ensigns in the Navy. I ask that to 4-star generals. I ask that to senior executive service, and I've asked that to presidents, right? It's the same thing. And so ask questions, intellectual curiosity, find opportunities to get in front of the customer with the problem to ask those questions. But if you can't, I do readouts. For I go to USA, I'll do a readout. So just follow some of the readouts, right? There's creators out there like myself trying to get more people into the defense industrial base to create more. But there are folks out there that'll share. And if you have a question, ask. That's the great thing about a community is if you have access and placement to a broad range of individuals like myself with the 10,000 folks we connect with on LinkedIn, can ask a question. I know I'm going to get a couple of pretty good answers out of it. And so bottom line is you can't do this alone. There's no one-stop shop to get the whole understanding of the United States government. SAM.gov is one glimpse into the investment opportunities that are there, but get out there, get into these trade shows. If not, follow a creator like myself that can help you really just get a deep dive if you can't afford to attend or you're too busy to attend these trade shows. Get the so what out of them. And there's a ton of resources that are out there, but you're right. You do have to look. It's not immediately present.
I don't think either of us have TikTok, so I won't put that in the description, but I will put your LinkedIn and your YouTube channel so people can connect with you. And if you're going to AFCEA West, I'll buy you a beer because that's the next big trade show that we're going to. Yeah, it's a good show. San Diego is beautiful, and we'll have a nice booth. But Mark, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show. This is fantastic. It's great to share your mission, what you're doing, how you're helping innovators and helping broadcast out. This is an important thing, right? If you want to help out country, you want to apply your smarts, this is it. This is the thing for you. So I really appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule and hopping on the show.
Thank you. No, it's been great. I love the content you produce. I've been a big fan of the show for a long time. It's just a little bit of a dream to come here and chat with you. It's just been a great conversation. And for those listening, now's the time to start supporting this defense industrial base. Yes, we're here to do a lot of business and make a lot of money for our investors, but the American people need us right now. And if you remember the lead up to World War II, it happened very fast, and this one will happen fast too. So looking forward to connecting with you out there. Reach out to me on LinkedIn or YouTube, direct message me if you got a question with this one. And man, thank you so much for this opportunity. This is a phenomenal platform, a great institution. I can't wait to continue watching this and be a fan of this podcast.
My name is Callye Keen, and this has been The Startup Defense.